My name is Alex, and 6 months ago, I was a 23-year-old bartender barely making rent in a tiny, cramped apartment in Brooklyn. My life changed with a single embossed letter bearing the crest of the Vance conglomerate. It wasn't junk mail. It was a summons. The Vances, one of the oldest and most influential families in American finance, had lost their only heir, a child named Ethan, 20 years ago in a boating accident that was never fully explained. The letter claimed a recent meticulous DNA cross-reference, prompted by the family matriarch's final deathbed request, had identified me as that long-lost child. I was the last known blood heir to a fortune estimated in the billions. The transition was instant and overwhelming. I went from mixing martinis to being fitted for bespoke suits in a Fifth Avenue penthouse that felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. The Vance patriarch, old Mr. Harrison Vance, was physically frail but possessed cold, piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate the cost of everything. The family welcomed me with a chilling blend of calculated, formal warmth and deep, unsettling skepticism. There was the formidable aunt, Charlotte, who ran the Vance Family Foundation with a corporate efficiency, and the distant, visibly resentful cousin, Richard, who had been quietly managing the estate, poised to inherit everything until I walked through the door. I knew I was playing a critical role under continuous high-stakes scrutiny. The deep, nauseating unease began not with the family's scrutiny, but with the foundation of my claim. The DNA test results were rushed. The historical records documenting Ethan's childhood were strangely incomplete, and my supposed childhood memories were conveniently vague. A huge, deliberate gap in the narrative I was given. But the knot in my stomach was the truth. I had worked the night shift at the outsourced lab where those DNA samples were processed. I was not the real Ethan Vance, I was an imposter. The real heir was still missing, but a desperate lawyer, tasked with fulfilling the matriarch's legal mandate, had offered me an untraceable, life-altering sum to step into the role and secure the estate from the aggressive grasp of Charlotte and Richard. My performance had to be flawless to earn my fee and my life. I studied old photos of Ethan, memorized rehearsed anecdotes about boarding school, and adopted the subtle, entitled arrogance of inherited old money. But I was not just acting for the immediate family. I was also maneuvering against them. Charlotte, the powerful aunt, clearly resented my sudden disruption, questioning my knowledge of both family history and the complex financial trusts at every opportunity. Richard, the ousted cousin, watched me with a viper's focused intensity, convinced I was a manipulative opportunist. The penthouse became a complex maze of polite smiles and silent, lethal threats. Every family dinner was a stressful trial. Every casual conversation, a thinly veiled interrogation designed to catch a slip-up. The deeper I embedded myself in the Vance ecosystem, the darker the world around me became. As the presumptive heir, I was granted privileged access to the family's private archives, not just the immense financial ledgers, but personal diaries, old correspondence, and heavily redacted police reports related to the original accident that had supposedly claimed the real Ethan. The official police conclusion, initially classified as an accidental drowning, was full of gaping inconsistencies in files that were closed far too abruptly. I realized the tragedy was not a random mistake of fate. It was a deliberate, calculated event. This discovery marked the core turn of my dangerous deception. The real Ethan hadn't drowned. He had been systemically erased. The Vance fortune wasn't just built on legitimate industry and clever investments. It was cemented by decades of systemic, brutal corruption, insider trading, and quiet betrayals. I discovered whispered, typed references to financial misconduct that made standard embezzlement look like shoplifting, and more chillingly, fragmented documents pointing toward a quiet history of eliminating threats, including, it seemed, the original legitimate heir. I now held the key to the family's darkest, most violent secret. The Vance dynasty was a criminal organization operating under the guise of high society. The weight of this truth crushed my already fragile moral compass. I wasn't just an actor playing a part. I was an active witness to institutionalized crime. I was faced with an impossible, terrifying choice. Use the powerful leverage I had gained to expose the Vances, destroying their powerful facade and potentially sending dozens of influential figures to prison, or protect the family's carefully crafted reputation, thereby maintaining the illusion of stability and securing my own fraudulent, bloody inheritance. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the corruption terrified me into a necessary silence, but my silence was fundamentally misinterpreted. Charlotte and Richard, observing my sudden, intense focus on the archives and my increasingly withdrawn, paranoid behavior, concluded that I was not looking for family history. I was looking for leverage against them, secrets they held about the estate's management. This crucial misunderstanding became the fatal complication. They believed I was consolidating power and preparing to usurp their authority entirely, and they decided I needed to be permanently, quietly eliminated. The sinister plot against me began subtly, escalating quickly. My custom-fitted car was mysteriously recalled for unscheduled maintenance by a mechanic I didn't recognize, and days later, I narrowly avoided a catastrophic high-speed brake failure on the highway. I started receiving anonymous, sophisticated threats delivered via heavily encrypted apps, warning me in chillingly technical terms to leave the country immediately. The air in the penthouse, once merely tense, became thick with palpable, targeted malice. They weren't just suspicious anymore. They were actively executing a planned assassination. The ultimate paranoia came when I conducted a frantic, covert search of the penthouse's library. Tucked deep inside the mechanism of an antique grandfather clock, I found a hidden, professional-grade listening device, a piece of expensive corporate espionage gear. It was clear that the elimination plot was being executed by those closest to the power structure, Charlotte and Richard, acting in cold, calculated concert. They had to eliminate me to secure the fortune and, far more critically, to ensure the family's decades-old secret about the real Ethan remained buried forever. My role shifted radically from imposter heir to reluctant investigator, and finally, to a terrified, hunted target. I spent my days conducting meticulous counter-surveillance, documenting their movements, recording every loaded conversation, and encrypting every single scrap of evidence about both their plot against me and the Vance family's sprawling criminal empire. The suffocating weight of the impending exposure and the immediate deadly threat to my life became an almost unbearable burden. The immediate confrontation was forced by them. Charlotte called a sudden, late-night emergency family meeting in the mansion's opulent study, claiming to have found irrefutable irregularities in my financial history. I walked into the room knowing with absolute certainty it was a physical trap. Richard was there, leaning against the marble fireplace, his smile cold and predatory. The moment I entered, Charlotte calmly sealed the heavy, soundproof oak doors. "Who are you really, Alex?" Charlotte asked, her voice dangerously quiet. The real Ethan had a specific, distinctive scar above his collarbone from a childhood fall. "Show us, Alex." They had been planning this moment for weeks, gathering the one piece of evidence my deception couldn't cover. I didn't comply. Instead, I pulled out a hidden digital recorder and played back a heavily edited, incriminating snippet of Richard and Charlotte discussing the accident that wasn't an accident. The air crackled with suppressed violence. They lunged at me simultaneously. I grabbed a heavy antique crystal decanter and smashed it into the glass door of a display case, creating a deafening diversion and providing a crucial second to escape the locked room. My final act was not one of flight, but of devastating justice. Running through the mansion's service halls, I didn't head for the main gate. Instead, I rerouted to the basement's security hub, grabbing the main digital server containing years of the family's encrypted security footage, financial logs, and digital correspondence. I knew the complete evidence of their murder plot against me, and the 30-year-old murder of the real heir was stored there. I handed the server, along with my meticulously compiled evidence on the Vance family's extensive financial crimes, to an anonymous contact at a major news syndicate, complete with a signed confession explaining my imposter deception and my singular motive, to finally expose the truth about Ethan and bring down the criminal dynasty. I chose the ethical high ground, sacrificing the life of luxury I had stolen from my conscience. The fallout was catastrophic and instant. The investigative exposé broke globally the next day, leading to the immediate freezing of all Vance corporate and personal assets and swift governmental investigations. Charlotte and Richard were arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder based on the irrefutable digital evidence I provided. The Vance dynasty, which had stood untouchable for a century, crumbled into financial ruin and criminal investigation. I lost the fortune I never truly owned, but I gained something immeasurable: my freedom and a clear conscience. The real Ethan. Vance's case, thanks to the reopened files, finally gained the intense international attention it deserved, and the massive search for the true missing heir began anew.